So today is Monday, July 5th, 2020, and we are on our yet unnamed Monday night stream where we try to bring awareness to issues and evils that your government is doing abroad that you probably would have missed or are missing without the context. By the way, I got this like blue screen and green screen, and I haven't figured out how to do the green screen yet. So I have a blue screen now. So it's like much nicer than having to see my bedroom. Not that that's just being me weird. So let's see. Anything important? Oh yeah, the one thing that we really need to understand is how imperialism works and why we need to be aware of the alleged Green New Structural Adjustment. So I am going to prepare something for some time with someone. I know I'm not being very specific, but what's going on is that you kind of have to understand how manufacturing works. And it's very well. I know who I was going to have Fadil Kabuban, but on Mondays he has his wife is teaching a class, so he babysits his kids. But after the end of the semester, we'll have him on so that you can kind of understand what the Green New Structural Adjustment can be and why we're all cooked and doomed. So yesterday in Azerbaijan, we had something explode in the middle of the Caspian Sea, and the Caspian Sea is on fire. On Friday, a pipeline blew up in the Gulf of Mexico, and the Gulf of Mexico is on fire. I heard that about a month ago, someplace in Nigeria had the same thing with deep sea drilling. And yeah, our oceans are on fire. And we will be seeing the hottest and driest summer. I've heard that California is facing unbelievable drought. I don't know how to pronounce this. Drought. Okay. Unbelievable drought. And they're going to be having a long fire season and a lot of forest fires. So the world is on fire, and our leaders are obsessed about keeping China impoverished or whatever it is. It's just utter nonsense. Joe Biden made an extremely jingoistic speech where a lot of Americans need to understand the history. Like, he doesn't know what he's saying, to be honest. But to understand the full implication of what he means or what he proposes or what whoever proposes, we kind of really have to understand deep down what imperialism is and what capitalism is and how it deliberately impoverished the world. That's a lot. Did I forget anything? I probably did. Oh yeah. Actually, Jenna, at the end, let's talk about Secretary Blinken's tweet from July 3rd. But with that, let's start with my small mini takedown. This is the shortest takedown I've ever made. It lasted only 3 minutes, and I am very proud of making such a short takedown because usually at Wednesday we will be going to part 2 of our takedown, but usually our takedown takes like 30 seconds, takes 3 hours. So I'm very proud of this. So watch why Cenk sucks.
Hello. So I just saw a tweet from Cenk Uygur that says, "We want a smart audience, not a dumb one." So if you can't tell a dictator like Assad didn't win an election with 95% of the vote, don't watch our show. You won't understand it. Watch a deranged clown and a serious journalist discuss their feelings for weeks. This triggered me because Cenk was both condescending and stupid. So I thought I could first show all the times he thinks his audience is stupid. In 2013, he said that Kim Jong-un executed this man by shooting some sort of a whatever. Just listen.
Okay. Then we go to Kim Chol, who was the vice minister of the army. Apparently his main crime was drinking and not being sufficiently depressed during the mourning period for Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-un said that he wanted, quote, no trace of him behind, down to his hair. So they had him stand in a spot and they dropped a bomb on him and incinerated him.
Now watch their 2018 show. He's reanimated himself. The Juch necromancy is back.
Right, this is during the talks. And so Kim Jong-chol kind of talked about whether or not Pompeo was sleeping comfortably after these talks. Take a look.
This is your first visit to our country yet. This was your first night in our country. Did you sleep well last night?
I did. Thank you for the comment.
Yeah, he does think you're stupid.
Okay, so this is just he shows that he does think your audience is stupid or he's stupid. Oh God, somebody made a really horrific comment. It's so gross. Oh yeah, the show used to be very, very, very gross. Yeah, anyways, so he does think you're stupid. And this is just not one. You can find thousands of such examples. Like, I don't know which one is weirder. Like the one where he supports Obama for bombing Libya, or the one where he's like he thinks that the fact that there are Nazis in Ukraine, by the way, is a Putin, like it's just like one after another. If you check their foreign policy, it's really psychotic. But we, on the other hand, like to know about other countries. So we interviewed Rosalind Constantino, who is now a professor emeritus in somewhere in Pennsylvania, either UPenn or Penn State, I can't remember. And she's going to talk to us about what exactly. So Kamala Harris a few weeks ago went to Guatemala, said something psycho. So she's going to just talk to us about what it means and what she means. By the way, please subscribe to us at historically.substack.com. We're not yet monetized, but we have a lot of good podcast content, newsletters, et cetera. So please subscribe to us and also watch as many videos as possible because we are so close to being monetizable. And with that, hi, Dave D. With that, we shall begin our interview that we pre-recorded with Rosalind Constantino. And then after that, we'll have Garrett Porter here to talk to us a little bit about what's going on in China and Taiwan. Welcome to another stream. Today we have Rosalind Constantino, who is now, as of last night, a professor emeritus at Penn State University. She has been studying Latin America, especially Guatemala, Mexico, and the U.S. foreign policy there since before most of us was born. And I've interviewed her once on the podcast about the genocide and the Civil War and everything that Ronald Reagan did there. And we're glad to have her back on our Monday stream. So welcome, Rosalind. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you for.
You look fantastic, by the way. I love the. Where do you want to begin? Because have you seen that video clip of Kamala Harris?
Yeah.
We're going to play it for the audience, but do you want us to play it once for you to comment?
No, I've heard it. I heard it enough.
You've probably heard it way more than you want to hear about it.
Yeah.
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come. The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our border. There are legal methods by which migration can and should occur. But we, as one of our priorities, will discourage illegal migration. And I believe if you come to our border, you will be turned back.
So before we jump into that, how did you get interested in studying Guatemala?
Okay, well, Guatemala specifically, I had been doing most of my work in Mexico. I was working on women's cultural contributions through specific historical, political, social periods, contexts. But I out of the blue, somebody from the Guatemala Human Rights Commission that was co-founded or founded by Sister Diana, who just died in the last couple of months, contacted me and asked if I would go with them on a delegation to investigate femicide in Guatemala. And it was a small group of a couple of scholars and a lawyer, a union organizer, and we went down. And I had known the story of Guatemala prior to that in ways that were anecdotal in the sense that my dad had been invited by friends to go down to Guatemala in the 80s to visit. And he told me he didn't want to go because he suspected one of his friends to be involved with the CIA.
Oh, wow.
Now, at the time, I was a teenager and didn't quite understand the implications. And it was later when I remembered that I thought, oh my gosh, this was it. So knowing the history, I felt so I felt it was my duty. I felt this strong obligation to get the word out. This was in 2005 was my first trip there, of what was happening, because the femicide was directly related and could be shown to be related to the U.S. intervention, both in all forms, politically, economically, culturally, et cetera, militarily, in that country. And I felt obligated. So I dropped a book I was almost finished in order to begin the research and documentation in Guatemala. A lot of the work has focused on how this has impacted women and violence against women and femicide. But again, this is also interrelated, that it's you can't talk about one part of it knowledgeably without understanding the other parts.
Okay. So the first thing I would like to discuss, I guess, is so everyone, we're going to put a link to our episode with Rosalind that we did almost 2 years ago. It is a very good primer on all the horrific history of the U.S. involvement. So I'm just curious, are there still trials going on with regards to the mass genocide campaign from the Civil War, or are they mostly done with right now?
Well, the major trial was that of Efrain Rios Montt, and after that, which he was found guilty, and then that was a mess. But I remember quite distinctly the day that the trial, but out of that trial, also, once that opened up, and this was when the CICIG, the commission, the International Commission by the UN to fight corruption in Guatemala, was in place and functioning. And after that, there were others, lower level officers that had been charged in certain cases, but a really big case that I was involved with by doing some translations was the case for the Army's military base that was used as a vacation, pleasure, time off center for the Army, in which they enslaved local women, Guatemalan women and girls, to cook, clean, and be available for sex at all times, anytime.
Can you talk a little about that? I remember you mentioning this in the podcast, and no one was able to see my reaction when you were talking about it. So
it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. These women, 20 years later, because this happened in the late 80s, I believe, and I can't remember the name, or the early 90s. I can't remember the name of the case, unfortunately.
We'll look it up. Quick question. How old was the youngest girl?
Oh, they were some of them you don't know their ages, but they were teenagers.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. Okay.
Yes, and that's partly what they were charged with, that it was the sexual trafficking. But these women were forced from their homes and would spend months at a time. They talked of being gang raped repeatedly for days on end, and different troops would come through, because this was sort of a vacation. It was for those who did well, could go there and get time off. And I have worked on rape as a weapon of war. This was only one example of rape and how it was used, because they often would, if the family members would rebel when these women were kidnapped and these girls were kidnapped, they would be killed, but they would be gone for months and months at a time. That was a horrible case. The next big case, unless you wanted to talk more.
No, I'm looking up just I remember I was just looking up my notes from the last time.
And they did find a few men guilty, a few officers guilty for that.
Yep. Okay. So I just looked it up, and it says that in 2016 they found Army officer Estelmar Francisco Reyes Giron guilty. And yeah.
I think there was another one who was also found guilty. It may have been one.
Yeah. But like, exactly.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, the other case was the case of the vice president under
Rios Montt?
No, not Rios Montt, the president. Yes, the man who became president, who had actually turned up in the film that was done in the 1980s by the Patricia. Oh boy, I should have reviewed these names.
Oh, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
The film that was made, it was a documentary that was made. And so President Otto Perez Molina was brought down during his presidency because he was involved with a scheme that had to do with money coming in from customs. Huge financial scandal that spread beyond him that he was very involved with. But ironically, in the 1980s, Pamela Yates did a film on Guatemala and what was going on down there. And she met with him while he was in a village that they had just had a massacre in, that he was in charge of. And he had a name. He had a front name. It wasn't his real name, but they were able to identify him. And the film that she did in the 80s was used in court against him. As having been involved because he shows the bodies of the dead Mayan that were there. And then he takes her up into a helicopter that is one of our Blackhawks. I believe it was a Black Hawk helicopter that we had supplied them with. So it served to show the connection between the U.S. With some military, along with all the rest that we know. I don't remember if he was one who was trained at the School of the Americas, but many of them were trained at the School of the Americas when it was in Fort Benning by then. In the 90s, it had already moved to Fort Benning. And maybe earlier ones in the earlier part of the war, because the war went from the internal war in Guatemala began in 1960 and went all the way until 1996. So it's one of the longest internal wars, and it wasn't really a civil war in the sense it was the government against the people. And so we had been training.
So it was basically like a counterinsurgency.
Yes, it was. And it was sparked by the row over the United Fruit Company that had major players in it, such as John Foster Dulles, who had been Secretary of State, he and his brother represented United Fruit legally. And during his time under Eisenhower was when they invaded, and there was a coup that threw out the democratically elected President Arbenz. And basically, the important thing about this intervention is, we talk about interventions, but the statistics are, and the story behind it would make it so much clearer for people to understand how these interventions worked. And what happened here was that there were uprisings of farmers, and the people were starving to death because they did not own land.
What did they not own?
Land.
Oh, okay. I see. Got it.
So they were starving and they were rebelling. But the land, 90% of the arable land in Guatemala was owned by United Fruit, although they only used a fraction of it.
Oh.
So under Arevalo and then with Arbenz, it got continued. They wanted United Fruit to sell the land that they had never used and were not planning to.
So they were just hoarding this land.
They were hoarding it. They had the massive amount of arable land, and they wanted to buy it at market value. They were offered market value.
So the Guatemalan government, like pre-Arbenz, was offering the United Fruit Company, they weren't even confiscating it, but offering market value, and the United Fruit Company organized a coup. Wow.
And the United Fruit Company with the U.S. was not going to, this is when corporations are becoming, citizens,
better citizens than us.
Yeah, and that was huge, and it was also a time from the late 40s when Arevalo was first in that the U.S. began to utilize to influence the narrative of communism. And
what does that mean?
Well, in the U.S., in order to convince people how horrible and why we had to back these counterinsurgencies in Guatemala was to say that they were communists and they were taking over. And
instead of saying that these are peasants and who have nothing, who have been in the land for
exactly
before time. I see now.
And for those people who worked at United Fruit, although United Fruit at one time paid their workers a little better than some other companies, United Fruit became Chiquita, and the other company was what is now Dole company. So these are companies that changed their names for political reasons, but they
obviously
would start.
That's fine.
Yeah, it was very bad. And people throughout Central America at the same time there were uprisings because they had nothing to lose because they had nothing. And the government...
And they had nothing to eat too, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. They had absolutely nothing and people starved. And the government was not involved with Russia. It was not a communist overtake. It was democratic socialism, as we've come to see in the U.S., that most people can understand when you say Social Security,
yes,
education, Medicare for all, those kinds of programs. These were democratically elected. Arbans that we overthrew got 65.44% of the vote.
That's more popular than almost every single U.S. president ever to have existed.
Okay. And 75% of the people voted who were eligible.
Like I said, that's more popular than almost
So these were truly democratically elected people that we overthrew. And so that's one part of this story. And, I'd like to keep this tied into what you began with, was seeing the vice president and hearing what she had to say, because to understand how painful it was for me to hear and for other people to hear what she said, you have to understand, or it's beneficial to understand that after the 1954 overthrow of the widely democratically supported president, who was only trying to get United Fruit to give back land, to sell back land that they purchased that they were never using. Okay, that when the war actually broke out, when the CIA was involved with this. Oh, and let me add this in there. I said that John Dulles, Foster Dulles, was the Secretary of State and was
under Eisenhower, right?
Under Eisenhower, and he and his brother Alan Dulles were both lawyers for United Fruit.
Oh wow! That's the humongous conflict of interest, right in there and then.
But he was also the head of the CIA, Alan Dulles.
Okay, yeah.
Secretary of State Dulles and his brother, head of the CIA Dulles, were the lawyers of Cromwell and
Sullivan, right?
Yes, Sullivan and Cromwell was the name of the New York law firm. And so, there was tremendous conflict of interest and tremendous interest. And it is true. And it's important to say that when United Fruit, through the beginning part of the 20th century, went into Guatemala and other countries, they did build infrastructure. They built roads, they built railroads, they built they hooked up electricity. It's what they also did in Cuba, but it let them believe, it allowed them, or in their minds, they allowed themselves to believe that they deserved to run the country because of that. Okay, so they had made major investments. They never paid they didn't pay taxes on their profits. And And that was important to know too. But they had made these investments because these are some of the counter arguments that would come out at the time, that they had made all these investments. And that's what they also did in Cuba. But the state was controlled by United Fruit, or in other Central American
That's
countries.
where we get the word banana republic from.
Yes, it comes from them. The Banana Republic comes from Guatemala, absolutely. So that was the situation. And then the war devolved into this 36-year fight that eventually became a genocide of the Mayan, that some 200,000, mostly Mayan people were murdered, most of them in 1980 through 1983, which were the years of Reagan and Vice President George W.H. Bush, who had also been involved with had been a leader in the CIA, had been involved with the CIA. And that is all well documented. There's no doubt about the number of people that we trained, the troops that we trained, the money that we...
Caipiles, right?
Caipiles were a vicious, so to be feared killing machine. They were known as the
I have written in our article about Dos Eres, which we can link.
Yes.
But basically, and Dos Eres is one village. According to Rosalind, it's 626 villages that
that were wiped off the face of the earth.
Yeah. So there were like 4 survivors in Dos Eres, and this like 2 little boys and 1 man who was out of town. And I don't wish that upon anyone, but we'll link to that. It's horrific.
Yes. And actually the Caipiles, well, after the war, many of the military became involved in business, so that many of the most important and richest business people are carries over from the military, the Caipiles included, and they have hooked up with the Zetas of Mexico, which are known as the most blood curdling of the Mexican drug cartels. And up in that same area in the northeast of the country, up near the Mexican border, is where they have been centered. Yes. So anyway, there's a history there, and part of what we should understand is not only the kind of fear and the brutality that it was a very performative genocide, so that it was meant to leave bodies hanging, baby pulled out of mother stomachs hanging in trees, and it's a brutality, but it's a brutality that the trauma, and when we just talked about the sex slaves, the trauma of these wars has not gone away, because these people are still alive. I was born in 1954. And the year that Arbenz was overthrown. So I was a teenager in the early part of, during the genocide. I was 11, 12, 13 during the genocide. And so those people who lived through that are still alive. And so when we talk about why are people leaving, we need to account for, no matter who you blame for the war, but for that war. And when the war was over, the guns that had flooded Guatemala never went away.
Yeah.
And the lack of 36 years worth of war, there's not a lot of functioning municipal governments there. And so who takes over? Who's in charge?
We don't know.
Who has the power? Well, the people with the guns.
Yep, got it.
and men. And when there's no social structures in place, and kids are, you've got thousands of children living in the streets, their parents have been murdered, or there's no work in their villages, gangs become a real problem. So, and these, if you look at the cases that have come forward of violence against women, just to use as one example of people who are leaving, or gang violence against people who refuse to play the games of the gangs, it is a level of brutality we don't know in the U.S. We don't know in the U.S. For femicide, we don't. When a woman is killed in the U.S., we don't have to look for garbage bags around the city with parts of her body in it. And that is a norm. That is not uncommon in Guatemala. Okay, so I believe that general knowledge of our history and our involvement and the involvement of the military. One of the other things that the military did after the war, because these guys, many of them, that was their life, and they were no longer supposed to be involved with the army. They started security companies. The ones who caused the insecurity started security companies. And, I actually interviewed some of them, and they had, really good rationales for why the security was needed, without thinking that I didn't know that they were the cause of that need. It is extremely dangerous. So the military still has tremendous, not just military power, but also economic power. And a lot of the corruption, that's the seat, that is the context for the corruption. And the amount of malnutrition has risen tremendously in the last decade. And we had been winning with USAID. I happened to know someone who worked, and we were getting a little better with infant mortality, with maternal mortality, with infant, I forget what the word is, when babies and children are too small, when they are with stunted growth, and it's back, and it's worse than it's really bad. And then on top of that, there are two other things that are happening, and that is the fight over the natural resources in these countries. So that we have for a long time watched villages battle the mining companies, mainly Canadian mining companies there. But then there's the hydro power projects that go in, and they're almost exclusively international companies. They're not nationally, they're not Guatemalan. They may have a Guatemalan piece to it, because some laws say that you have to have somebody from the country, like in Mexico, has to be part of it. But they're international companies, and they're still, killing the activists who fight those fights to keep their lands, to keep their water, to not be thrown off again. And anyway, the point is that the situation has gotten a lot worse. The corruption has gotten worse. Although a lot of us were very excited about 5 or 6, 10 years ago when we started to see mass mobilizations. And this was about the time of Otto Perez Molina, when he was, and some of his cronies were arrested and put into jail, the ex-president. But it seems like the corruption has gotten worse, and what they've done is to attack the judiciary to make it impossible to bring people to justice.
That reminds me a lot. Hold on. By the way, it's fine. Go ahead. It's okay. I was going to ask you about if it kind of reminds me of Lava Jato, but it's not important.
Go ahead. Go.
Oh, I was saying it reminds me a lot of what the Obama government did with Brazil with regards to Lava Jato, which was where they just made up like this Trump. It was a coup against Lula da Silva. And so that's exactly what they did, is they kind of dismantled the judiciary piece by piece.
Exactly. And that's exactly what, and
that's
now
how we got
Lula da
Bolsonaro.
Silva was able to survive, and he's back. But the extent of the damage done since then, I mean, this is a repeated, if you look at what's happening in Latin America now, I mean, they just exposed that in Peru, there was somebody in the US military who offered to be able to pull together some mercenaries to fight for the Fujimori.
Yeah, we actually interviewed Ali Vargas 2 weeks ago. But yep, there's a death squad exactly like the Bolivia situation, and I guess yeah.
Yep, it's well, Esha, you don't have to be despite one's political leanings. So a lot of things have happened in Latin America since I was there, living there in 2010, 2011. And the U.S. started, when I was living in Guatemala, they reopened or built new 11 military bases in Guatemala.
Are you familiar with Vortec?
Isn't Vortec the new name for the school of... I'm not sure.
Okay. So apparently, the U.S. Immigration Department, ICE.
Oh, yes, that hidden group.
Yeah. So what it is that they're like a border control, but they should not be controlling the border between Guatemala and Mexico because it's not their country.
Yes,
and they're there still, and we. Yeah. Why?
Yeah. Well, this is, and instead of bringing people when the bill was passed, was Kennedy's bill, Joe Kennedy's bill to close down the School of the Americas in the late 90s, it just evolved into, they changed the name of it basically. And then we started to send groups down there to train. Instead of bringing them up here. So we offered all these
outsourcing.
It became outsourced, but they built there. If you look at a map of South America, Central America, and the Caribbean, and look at where our bases are, it's like it's unbelievable. And but so the battle continues. The battle continues with the most recent elections, and we're so busy with trying to figure out our own elections that we're not taking a look at how we're just repeating history. And with the other thing that is really important that comes into this is at the same time, nobody who lives there, most people who live there, it's not their fault, but the climate crisis is extreme. So you have parts of Central America that have been hit where villages are wiped out with mudslides, and there are places that haven't been rebuilt from last year's or the year before's major hurricanes, and people can't grow anymore. If you can't grow and you have no land to even grow your own food, you're
hungry. You have to move.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Esha, I'm saying your name correctly, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I think that as we listen to what's happening in the U.S. now, we're getting a taste of, we're becoming familiar with the real climatic, environmental consequences of this climate crisis, where it's affecting what can be grown, because we're running out of water, mainly, is the biggest problem in many of our high growing areas. And so anyway, what was painful for me listening to the vice president was she spoke to the people there. It felt like on my end, the listening end, and I don't say that she means this. I don't know that she has a whole lot of background in Central America. And I think she went.
That's a huge problem for a vice president to not know about our neighbors.
Well, but she's, you're involved in so many. She was fighting so many other battles, so I try to give people the benefit of the doubt to not be familiar and be told to tout a line that I don't know how she herself felt about it. But what she said and the tone of voice she said sounded so much like the political cartoons that were done back in the turn of from the 19th to the 20th century, where it was Big Uncle Sam and all of the people of the Caribbean and Central America were shown as dark children who had to be what's the word in English? Not castigado, but where you have to control their behavior.
Discipline and.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes. So these cartoons show Uncle Sam in his red, white, and blue outfit and top hat being a real tall figure, and then almost like pickaninnies are the depictions of those depiction of Africans, of really derogatory depictions of people from the Americas as dark and children who have to be disciplined.
Oh, Lord.
And if you listen to her tone of voice, when she says over and over, do not come, do not come, do not come, my heart bled, because I don't know if people realize how that's received on the end of people who have been terrorized by their government and factions within and outside of their country, to the extent that these people have, where they have no control over their life. And so I forget where I was going with that.
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris, yes. So that was one thing. And then the other thing that most people, I didn't hear repeated, but I heard the comments made that they told those in Guatemala, the agreement was made to give military aid for the border control and for the flow of people.
Oh, okay.
Like after all that I've just explained,
yeah, that's quite.
To know that would be your. So what is it that we said we're going to try to help these countries? That doesn't help people whose lands won't produce because all the topsoil's been flooded away. And it's not like they cause, it was very painful for me. It was painful to hear the mention of money going to the military. My God, how much more money can go to the military? That isn't the answer to get people to stop.
Yeah, I agree.
But we rely on that. That doesn't solve the problem. And I don't know, it's not an easy problem to solve anywhere in the world.
It's much easier to destabilize and destroy a country than it is to fix it. And I don't think it's even profitable for the powers that be to want to even do that. So
that's exactly it. We're not making it better for ourselves. At least for, I don't know who it makes it better for. People who can talk about the importance of military spending can in foreign relations could comment on that. I have my ideas about it, but I do not see that is the fix that, especially considering that most of these countries, especially the Northern Triangle, were so impacted by U.S. intervention in the 20th century, and not in a positive way. And the ones who suffer the most, of course, are the indigenous, of which in Guatemala, when I first started working there, the figure was about 60%. And now I hear everywhere from 45 to 55% of the population is Mayan. And Mayan is
Wait. It went from 60% to 45%?
Well, this is the stats. So, and these stats are not easy.
Genocide.
But no. This was before this was after the genocide. This was just in the 2000s.
Okay.
The numbers are changing, but I also have to point out how difficult it is to do a census in those countries. But some people still say it's more than 50% of the population is pure Mayan. And Mayan is not a group. It's an overarching group of which there are 23 different languages.
Okay.
That's another problem when Mayan come to the US. If there are those who don't speak English, it depends on which group you're from, which Mayan language you speak, and it's not easy to get translators for people.
I remember hearing about like people who come and then they're trying to speak to them in Spanish, but that's also not their native language.
No, it's not. No, and some of the more common, the larger linguistic groups, the Quiche and Cachiquel, but there's so many other ones, and especially from these small areas that we were unable to communicate with. The problems are severe, and I don't know anyone who works with or works in these areas that would say just bring everybody in. No. And most people don't want to leave. They don't want to leave the country, you know, and they're not coming for the American dream. Media keeps putting that on.
Oh God, I hate that idea. Like, it's kind of funny. Last week, I was just trolling a racist, but this was true. They're like, why do you guys want to move near Indians? I'm like, no. I mean, near white people, I'm like, no, Indians, we shed our blood to not live near white people. We call it Independence Day. And that and then after a while, he couldn't, it took him quite a long time to understand that it's like, he just doesn't understand proportions. And of course, the American dream doesn't even exist here. So what are they talking about?
Yeah, exactly. No, these people are not looking for the American dream. They're looking to not be killed. And there are so many documented cases of people who have sought asylum, been sent back, who are immediately killed. Women who have been brutally murdered by their partners and by gangs. Gangs who track down people who escape. They're able to track them down in the U.S. It's amazing. And it's frightening. And I think that what I hope for anyone who gets sent down there as a spokesperson for the U.S. and for the government, that at least their voice would show empathy to say, we understand. We're working on a solution.
Never understand, because they don't even know they don't care to even know what happened. Right?
No. Some of them have been around a long time. And when you hear their rhetoric, it's a carryover. It's the same rhetoric that was used in decades before that brought on so much of the really difficult consequences. So, yeah, it was painful, and I'm not sure how this will work out. I don't know. We in Pennsylvania here have, been somewhat infamous for the Berks Detention Center, where women and their children have been there for a year and a half, 2 years, where there have been sexual assaults where, and they're not supposed to be held that long. They're women with babies, and it's just really heartbreaking. And when you know those stories, then just to have empathy for the people that are attempting to come in and not to willfully subject them to horrible situations. Again, I don't think any of us just say we have to take in everybody in the world who need to be. I mean, we have to figure out a system, because we don't have a system to do it.
Well, first thing I would say, starting with the not killing everything that moves, maybe not the death squads, stop making their country miserable. Would be the first step, I'd say.
But impunity, I mean, Guatemala has been known for its impunity.
Yeah.
And that's why we were so excited with the people who had been brought to justice. And but it's a long road, and facts keep shifting. And I don't doubt that there are people trying to come across the border who are not good people. because all groups are made up, but you can't label all of them like that. You just can't if you know what the stories are. And the remedy, I really was hopeful that we were going to look at what would be a long-term remedy. And we're already spending the money. It's a matter of where we spend the money and what we spend it on. I don't know what more military money they need. We've given, so, I don't know, but I don't know. So maybe that's something I need to research more, what they're putting that into. But it was disheartening, to say the least.
I completely understand. I mean, and for me, it's that discussion that the press never asks her, like, what do you think about the fact that the U.S. government exterminated 626 villages? Do you think we have a responsibility towards Guatemala? Like, those kind of questions never get asked. It's only like racist fear mongering that is a lot. Like, none of this is ever gonna, like, no one's gonna ask this question, right?
Well, I would be careful about saying that the U.S. extinguished, wiped these off.
I know, I agree.
They facilitated, this, and the documents are there. When I first began working and being interested in this, you didn't have access to a lot of these documents. It wasn't till media technology expanded that a lot of the National Security Archive declassified material is available online. We're not being denied access to the facts and the information. And I don't, there's a piece of me, and I don't know if this belongs in your stream, but there's a piece of me that also measures in my own life how much time and energy goes into trying to keep my finances safe and my family safe and figure out the medical billing, which, I have degrees and I still can't figure out the bills that come and what I'm supposed to be paying. My life just feels there's not a whole lot of room left in our brains. We're very distracted by personalities who have done tremendous damage. And so how can we expect everybody to know everything? I mean, the fact that we are not taught in schools, forget that we're not taught about Guatemala, we're not taught about Oklahoma. And the burning of Black Wall Street. We're not taught about Reconstruction and the rise of the origins of some of the many problems that we're still suffering today. So, and I think people, you just go into overload. Don't you feel that sometimes?
Well, I agree that people go into overload, but I feel like a lot of energy is wasted on just events, and nothing is tied together like to them about like, hey, I call it historical Mordorism, where it's just like there's nothing that's tied instead of historical materialism, because like it's just like magic things happen in and in, and they never ever like
connect the lines.
It never connects to anything to them.
Yeah, I get that.
And I that's what I try to do to people. Like a lot of it is just like trying to connect it. Like look at things like look at who's in charge, who was historically in charge, what happened, what didn't happen. Like just simple things. I blame it. I have a theory that it's a lot has to do with the way the U.S. government tests things. In that, like, because of the no child kind of testing, a lot of people like are used to just like looking at the four squares and not seeking new information and not seeking what's omitted. And a lot of times it's not that there's outright lies. There's just a lot of context that's missing. So if you say, I don't know, like in India, let's say you with any statistic in India, you say like 30 million people speak this language, and it's just poof. You might think, oh, something horrible is happening. But then when you realize India has 1 billion and that's about less than 1%, suddenly like things change. And so that kind of context is always missing. So you're given information, but not where to place it and how to, and the context.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that we have to acknowledge I can acknowledge my own privilege that I dedicated my life to a profession where I was able to read and to learn. And not everybody, when you're working, when the times that I've been worked 2 or 3 jobs at the same time, when I was putting myself through school, there isn't a whole lot of time. And we are very distracted by things that are said to be so immediate that, that they take. And I just think that we only have so much energy, mental and spiritual energy, that we're seeing has been put to the test during the pandemic. I mean, we're starting to see the effects. And although we talk about mental health needing to be addressed, haven't heard of any real immediate pushing for more mental health, enabling of mental health availability services for people. I hope that comes about, because I can say that our young people are definitely traumatized over the last few years. Many people are. You know.
By the way, I don't know how much longer we have you for, but do you have any closing comments? Anything else that I forgot to ask you about?
Well, just that I want to end on a positive note. I just have spent time at an international meeting of specialists in Latin America from all the different knowledge bases. So poli-sci, history, everything, literature and film and economics, environmental, agriculture. And I'm many of them from Latin America. I hold out hope for the energy, the insight of newer, younger generations who I think really understand that they can't sit back, because sitting back means they may not have anything to sit back on. And so and the number of women that are involved in a lot of these movements is great, because and the number, the diversity is great, because it means we're really drawing on our larger population. And when we leave out any segment, whether it's by generation or color or religion or whatever, we lose part of human knowledge and creativity. And so I do feel that hopefully that I do feel some hope. Yeah, that's what I'd like to leave with.
Okay. Thank you so much. And we're going to put your Twitter link on, and you must follow her. I've learned a lot, and you were one of my first interviews. So thanks again for joining us again. And we really appreciate this, because we've been trying to put this whole thing in context, and you did it in like 1 hour in a way that none of us could have done by ourselves. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
So welcome back. I've seen some good comments. Leslie said political education is a must. Absolutely. The worst part about the living in the heart of the empire, the belly of the beast, is that people not only don't get politically educated, they're completely wrong, and they have completely an inverted picture of everything going on. So they don't even have a framework from which to understand the world, and that's what makes it so hard. So thank you. John Spinoza said, great interview. And we need critical thinking said, the Pentagon media does not allow reporting and showing pictures of dead or injured children and families from its imperialism. If it did, more people would care. I don't think so. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of trauma porn. The reason why more people don't care is that they otherize. It's not their fault. It is the fault of the propaganda, the hegemony. But it's kind of always very done in such a normalized way, you can't get Americans to even understand. Like, I mean, you can't get people to understand the basics. Like, it's impossible, to be honest. I don't know what to say other than why can't we get Americans to understand? Well, they don't have a framework for understanding that we got. And you can survive without learning because so much of the problems Americans face is not actually real physical problems, but problems with your rich bourgeoisie just looting you. So, for example, the US is at the top of the food chain. This means that the US can print money whenever it wants. And since it sucks resources from every country, it can basically, if humans know how to manufacture it, the US can manufacture it here. But they choose not to because they're psycho. But most Americans are just comfortable enough, and then they have confidence in their military and police just enough that they don't need to give you anything else. And you don't even have the consciousness to even figure out how to get it because problems on the left are new problems. Janet, can you tell me when Gareth is online so that, okay, let's go to him because I was just rambling. Okay. Hi, Gareth. It's been a long time since we've spoken. Last time it was been almost 2 years when you were on the pod to talk about Iran. How are you doing? You had a book about the nuclear.
Yes, yes. The Iran nuclear issue. Yes. So now I'm into U.S.-China.
Okay, so can you explain what is going on for people who are not familiar or what they need to learn?
You mean about U.S. and China?
Yeah, that you've discovered recently.
Yeah, sure. I mean, what I've been doing is really looking into the political background of the issue of Taiwan in U.S.-China relations, because it's very clear that if there's going to be an armed clash between the United States and China, it's really going to be about Taiwan. It's not going to be about some godforsaken South China Sea island, or rather a rock, a little piece of rock that is being treated as a military asset. Basically, what I have found is that there is a very interesting history here in which the Chinese were eagerly trying to get the Taiwan government in the 1990s to enter into political dialogue based on the notion that that there's one China and that whatever the Taiwanese government's view about itself, and at that point, of course, it was the Republic of China. It was the old Chiang Kai-shek nationalist regime, still existing. But in 1992, the Chinese set up a meeting with a prominent businessman from Taiwan, probably the leading, most wealthy businessman in Taiwan, who was interested in doing business with China. And on an unofficial basis, he met with an unofficial delegation from the mainland, and they came to an agreement on what was called the 1992 consensus, because it took place in the year 1992. And the idea was that they would both agree that there's one China, and they could, interpret that in different ways. But the concept was that there was not going to be two Chinas. Okay, there was not going to be competing sovereignties here at work, and so that was the basis then for subsequent negotiations between the People's Republic of China and the Taiwan government, which began a remarkable period of ultimately what turned out to be a great efflorescence of economic cooperation as well as other forms of political social cooperation between the two regimes. And this has now kind of been shoved into the background. People are not really aware of it anymore. But it's extremely important because it established nearly a decade, from 2008 to 2016, nearly a decade of this cross-strait cooperation, which raised the standards of living in Taiwan considerably. It helped economically within Taiwan. And it was a way of keeping the peace and avoiding high tensions between the People's Republic and the Taiwan government. So it was very successful. But then what happened was that in the 2016 election, this went on from 2008 to 2016, okay? 2016 election in Taiwan, what happened was that this new political party, the Democratic Progressive Party, which was had a large contingent of people who identified as Taiwanese, native Taiwanese rather than Chinese, and more importantly, had a political agenda which was quite frankly separatist. They believed in having a separate Taiwan, which is with its own sovereignty, which had nothing to do with mainland China. And of course, that was problematic because if that party got power and really continued to maintain that position, there would be obviously there was going to be some raising of tensions between the two regimes, and that's exactly what happened. Now, just very briefly to go back and sort of look again at that period from 2008 to 2016, what was very important to know is that the U.S. government was keeping the pressure up against the DPP to make sure that they were not going to cause problems in the in this very good relationship between the mainland and Taiwan. And there were repeated instances in which this DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party candidate, began to talk about a separatist agenda. And every time that happened, the United States came down hard and fast on them and made it clear that that was not acceptable. And so it went away. But in 2016, this new candidate who won from the DPP, Tsai Ing-wen, a woman who had been in the process of formulating policy toward the mainland for years and had in the past overtly supported the separatist agenda, it caused some problems. She was elected, and so there was another period of sort of crisis here. But then what didn't happen is more important. The United States government did not come down on her, and instead let her continue to hold out that she would not agree to the terms that had provided the basis for this very positive relationship, cooperative relationship for more than a decade. So that has been going on now since 2016, that she has continued her own political agenda, and the Chinese government, as one might expect, has shown not just a lot of unhappiness with her, but has now entered into a new strategy toward Taiwan of putting overt pressure on the island. They've done so by cutting off, of course, all economic contacts, for one thing, and making it more difficult for people to travel between the mainland and Taiwan. But also, more importantly, they have started to use, flights across the Taiwan Strait, not all the way to Taiwan, to the island of Taiwan, but towards the middle of that strait, which goes beyond the line which the Taiwanese government has established as their air defense zone, their identification zone. And so they've deliberately violated that in order to make the point that you can't do anything about it, and we have this power, and you'd better pay attention to it. So it's the beginning of this process of China putting very strong pressure on Taiwan because of the presence of a DPP president who is not willing to cooperate with them on the terms that they had been cooperating.
So it sounds almost like the mirror image of the U.S.-Iran relationship in some ways, in that the one party just backs out unilaterally. Also, does U.S. have some sort of mutual defense agreement or anything like that with Taiwan that could not accidentally, of course, but could lead to disaster if things escalate more?
Well, I mean, the formal answer, the technical answer is no. There is no mutual defense agreement between the United States and the Republic of China, which is the formal name of the Taiwan government. And there hasn't been since the Nixon administration, when I take that back. It was the Carter administration that formally ended the mutual defense agreement in order to set up the formal diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China. But the reality is that in Congress there has been such a powerful lobby from the Taiwan government, particularly the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party. But even before that, before the DPP was elected, the Taiwan lobby, representing both the government and Taiwanese living, particularly in California, but also elsewhere in the United States, have provided money to candidates and have lobbied hard, and they've been extremely successful. People don't know generally that the second largest caucus in Congress, next to the Israeli caucus, the pro-Israeli caucus, is the Taiwan caucus. They have something like 150, if I remember correctly, members in the House. Wow. And so they are extremely powerful, and they can really pass legislation at will, almost, on anything having to do with Taiwan.
Party supports then. And quickly, yes, for people who don't know, Taiwan used to be occupied by Japan. And then correct, in 1940 something, 46 or 47, there was a civil war between the KMT, which is the party that was that used to be in charge of the Republic of China, and the PLA, which is the People's Liberation Army. And right, the KMT was defeated, and the defeated KMT went and ran away. Okay, not ran away, but just went to Taiwan. And the PLA right, didn't really have an air force or a navy, so they couldn't go. And that's basically the story.
He had to retreat to Taiwan, and that was the beginning of this split between the mainland and Taiwan, because in 1950, when the Korean War began, the U.S. government, the Truman administration, made the fateful decision that they would defend or prevent the Chinese government from continuing its process of taking over Taiwan and uniting it with the mainland. So because the Chinese government at that point was not militarily strong enough, that situation of Chiang Kai-shek's government being able to maintain its control of Taiwan, of course, went on and on, year after year. And as a result, you had this long-term split between the two regimes. And that's where this process of, the PRC trying to begin to build a bridge to Taiwan and to establish a very soft sort of process of getting Taiwan to agree that they're both part of China. And when that started in 1992, the Taiwan government, they had enough people there that they were willing to go along with this because they were Chinese, and they agreed that there is only one China, basically. I mean, that there is a China, and that Taiwan, belongs to China. But they claimed, of course, that they had legitimacy throughout China, meaning that the mainland was really loyal to them as well, which of course was not true, but that's what they claimed. And so the point of all this is that because of the power of the Taiwan lobby in Congress, there has been a de facto situation of an understanding that the United States has a responsibility for Taiwan's security. And although there's no formal commitment to defend it, it has become a kind of accepted fact within the national security state that, yes, of course, we can't afford not to defend Taiwan if they're attacked by China. So that's kind of in a nutshell the situation. Yeah.
And we just don't want nuclear countries to be warring with each other because, well, God knows what happens then. So it's very concerning. What do you suggest that people do, or what should we be aware? What should we look out for in the future, I guess?
Yeah, I think that people need to be aware of the fact that what is happening right now and will continue to happen into the future indefinitely, and probably will become more intense, is that China is going to insist on its right that it has the right to put pressure on Taiwan to come around and at least sit down and talk about how peacefully to bring about the unification of China. And they take it very seriously. It has become an enormously popular issue within the People's Republic, more now than ever before, according to what most people have picked up from reporting within China and from formal statements. And so there is a process here which is going to create greater tension between the PRC and Taiwan, but also almost automatically greater tension between the PRC and the United States. And so this whole question of the United States going along with the policy of a government in Taiwan run by a woman who is a known supporter of separatism.
Okay, got it. Sorry.
And governing with a party, the Democratic Progressive Party, which still has a plank in its formal statutes calling for separatism or a separate Taiwan, a Republic of Taiwan. That's what their aim is. And so, I mean, this is a very serious problem that has simply not been taken with the seriousness that it deserves, because the press is taking their cues from the U.S. government, and the U.S. government does not want to talk about that.
Yeah, I noticed that. Like, it's amazing how they just fall into line. Is there a plan for integrating Taiwan into China's Belt and Road Initiative, or not really?
Not really, because of the fact that the PRC still maintains a strategy of freezing out the Taiwan government economically as much as possible. They want to deny them, in whatever way they can, the benefits of participation in any Chinese initiatives, such as the Belt and Road Initiative. So they would definitely hold out, that could only happen if the Taiwan government accepts the 1992 principle, essentially, or something close enough to it that indicates that they're acting with goodwill, that they're dropping their pretense of the possibility of separatism on the part of Taiwan.
Okay, so do we know what caused this rise of the separatist sentiment around 2016? Is there any clues to it, or did it just suddenly pop up?
No, it didn't suddenly just pop up. There are clear reasons why this happened. One of them was that the Kuomintang Party, the Nationalist Party, which was Chiang Kai-shek's party when he came to Taiwan, began to splinter and weaken, and its candidates just weren't very good. And at the same time, more importantly probably, there was a process which was engineered by the DPP, that this party which has a separatist plank in its statutes. They deliberately engineered a process of sort of teaching the Taiwanese that they are native Taiwanese with their own Taiwanese national identity, which they never had. They never had that in the past. This is something totally new. So this is something that was created politically for the purpose of supporting this separatist movement. And that has become part of the problem, no doubt about it.
Who benefits? Like who would profit from this separatist movement?
Organization that has an interest in this, and that is its whole power depends on a sufficient number of Taiwanese feeling that they have that kind of identity. Now, not all their voters, people who vote for the DPP, share that identity. Some of them, say that they're both Taiwanese and Chinese, and some of them only are feeling the Taiwanese identity. So it's a combination of this Taiwanese identity voters and voters who believe that they are both Taiwanese and Chinese in their identity, who are keeping the DPP in power. But I mean, and here's something that the Chinese government definitely is calculating and counting on. There's still a possibility that because of the costs and the risks, not just the costs, but the risk of war between Taiwan and the mainland that go with this stance that the present government is taking. And by the way, Tsai Ing-wen, who won in 2016, then was reelected in 2020.
Yeah.
So
did she have to resign in 2018 or something like that? Or am I getting it mixed up?
Sorry, I don't. Who resign?
Never mind. Don't worry about it. So she was She's still the leader of Taiwan then.
She's still the president, and there'll be the next election in 2024. Now, there are some indications that there may be some problems with the DPP's party's position at this point in terms of the next election. That the old Nationalist Party is now regaining some of its strength, has better candidates lined up for 2020 than does the DPP. So it's not a foregone conclusion that the DPP is going to win in 2024. But the Chinese government is going to do its best to provide the kind of incentives that if a Taiwanese voter is thinking about the costs and risks of the present policy, they're going to do whatever they can to add to those costs and risks.
Okay. And I guess I'm trying to understand what besides the Taiwan lobby, is there any profit motive or anything that would want the U.S. besides like individual, like power of the individual lobby that would want where the U.S. would want to do something like this?
Well, of course, yes. I think I know where you're going with this question. The obvious answer to this is yes, that there are arms manufacturers who would like to, to arm Taiwan governments to the teeth. And indeed, under the Trump administration, there was a major sale of arms to the Taiwan government, including F-16s, the latest version of F-16s. And this was regarded by China. Well, they took a very dim view of that, obviously, but the arms manufacturers are very happy about that. And so that would be one very strong lobbying group that can be counted upon to say, yeah, let's keep the status quo just as it is. Mm-hmm. No change in U.S. policy, because that's to their advantage. Incidentally, the ironic thing about that sale was that it was recognized by most defense specialists in the U.S. government that F-16s are the last thing on earth that Taiwan really wants or needs for its defense, because it's a losing proposition to use to try to defend themselves with F-16 fighters, because China has enormous superiority in the air over Taiwan. And so they're wasting their money, is essentially the message that was delivered by people, at least in the Obama administration, who were not in the Obama administration, excuse me, in the Biden administration, looking back on what the Trump administration did. They were suggesting that Taiwan had made a serious mistake, and they need to focus on very, very different forms of defense, which are what they call asymmetrical, not trying to match what China has in terms of weapons.
Asymmetrical kind of bothers me because that kind of often means a lot of terrorist acts.
Yeah, I know that has a reputation, doesn't it? But what they meant was that they should have mines in the waters. They should have the capability for defending the island from an amphibious attack. Doing all kinds of things to defend against an amphibious attack. That would be much better than having. I mean, the arms that they got were things that would allow them to attack the mainland. Well, that's not really going to help them very much. I mean, that's not going to. But in any case, I mean, they're outgunned. They're totally outgunned by the PRC. There's no way that Taiwan itself can defend itself.
So it's basically just adventurism that's probably going to get.
Well, I mean, the Taiwanese have always counted on the United States to take care of them, even though there's no, as we've said, there's no formal agreement to do that. They nevertheless, they know that they can't defend themselves, and so they've always just assumed that the United States will take care of it. And that may be, and it may not be. Public opinion in the United States is moving against this sort of policy year by year. There's less and less willingness to do that sort of thing. And so that's not to be taken for granted by any means as time goes by. But that's what the Taiwanese believe, and that's one of the reasons, if not the main reason, why they have been willing to support the DPP, because they assume that the United States is going to deter mainland China from attacking. But that's not really the case.
And I know we only have you for just a few more minutes, but you're having an upcoming piece in the Gray Zone about this, right?
Yes. This will be published soon. I can't tell you exactly when, but soon.
Okay, we will keep an eye out on it. Thank you so much. And one last question that somebody asked: can you ask him about Afghanistan? Does he believe the U.S. will leave Israeli living?
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question, because I've been asking myself that almost daily for months now. And I do believe that we are leaving, our combat troops are getting out, but there's going to be a small contingent there. It's not going to be capable of defending anything really, except for the embassy against, attacks by a crowd, that sort of thing. But they are still going to have people carrying out intelligence operations and helping to make decisions about whether the United States should bomb in Afghanistan. That's going to be the problem in the future.
That's really not actually. That doesn't sound like getting out to me. It just sounds like
changing
logistics.
It's not getting out in the most meaningful sense. I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
But that's the way it's being popularly understood, that we're getting out because of the troops getting out.
Aha. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and hope you join us again. And we really appreciate you taking the time to come and tell us about all that's going on here.
Well, we'll have more going on about China in the future, I'm quite sure, to talk about. Thanks so much. Oh
my God. Well, thank you so much. Have a great rest of the evening.
You too. Thanks, Esha.
So right now, I thought I would just bring out a tweet from Secretary Blinken, and Janet should have it ready, and let me know when you have his draft tweet. I just kind of want to show you what kind of horrible garbage he is. Janet, are you there? Okay. So let me know when you put the tweet up so that we can show what kind of dastardly garbage of a man he is.
Okay. Just
Okay.
give me 1 second.
Of course, I will be renting. I found out some information about his stepmother, Vera Blinken, whose family, it's just bizarre. Jenny Lynn said, another great interview. Thank you, Jenny. And the most depressing thing for me is there are 40 people watching my stream and 5,000 people watching Vosh's stream simultaneously. And I'm like, no wonder we're doomed.
I know, no kidding. Okay, so the tweet is up. Hold on, I just gotta resize it so that everyone can see it. It has yours and theirs.
Yeah, just use my screenshot because I've highlighted the important part of the screenshot. Because he's such a garbage person. He's such a disgusting human being.
Oh, okay. So I have your whole tweet. You wrote. He wrote. Today marks the 77th anniversary of the end of Nazi Germany's brutal occupation.
Click on my screenshot of his tweet where I've highlighted that.
Okay, hold on.
The third, yeah, I know it's complicated. Sorry.
we have a few.
Okay, I'll just read it. It says today marks the 77th anniversary of the end of Nazi Germany's brutal occupation of Minsk. I can't see it anymore. You just have to read it now.
I know. I screwed it up.
It's okay. Just read it, and I remember the last phrase. So
I always screw everything up.
It's okay. Just read it, and I'll read the.
I added the wrong thing. So today marks the 77th anniversary of the end of the Nazi Germany's brutal occupation of Minsk. We're reminded of Belarusians' continued struggle for a brighter future. To the people of Belarus.
He said, "Zhivya Belarus."
At the end. Yeah.
That is literally I know it means long live Belarus, but it is literally a Nazi slogan, as you can see on the Nazi propaganda that I put in. So it's like, to me, it's either A, very culturally ignorant, or B, a dog whistle, because as we have all know, the US has been trying to support other fascists inside of Belarus for the past maybe at least a year. Like a year, it's okay for the past like 20 years, but at least for the past year, it's been just like on. So, and Belarus lost the most amount of people and the highest percentage of people to World War II. So why would he do that? Is he that? It's hard for me to believe it's not a dog whistle given his slimy nature, but I just thought I'd bring it up so that you guys are aware of whatever is. It could be stupidity, but he should have deleted it by now. So it has to be malice, is what I'm guessing. But it's neither here nor there. It's just how messed up everything is, and how you need to be watchful of all the gruesome things that the U.S. government does at all times with constant vigilance. Otherwise, you'll see it'll be like a Guatemalan genocide, and none of us will be aware until like 20 years later when they declassify the files, which by then will be way too late. Everyone will be dead by then. On that note, we will continue with our Soviet summer this Wednesday. Matt F. will be back at, what time did we decide, Janet?
I think we did it at 9:00 on Friday. Do you want to do 9:00?
Yeah, let's do that at 9:00. And we've moved our Sundays with Lennon to late nights with Lennon for Friday night at, what time did we decide on that?
We're going to do we're going to try to keep it 10 to 12, but we may go over midnight, but.
Okay, 10 to 12, late nights with Lennon. Get very, Lennon would not approve of anyone getting any intoxication because he was like a prude, but we don't care whether, just get drunk if you want to. It doesn't matter what Lennon wants. But yeah, he only allowed tea and no smoking and no drinking in his office, but it doesn't matter. You guys get drunk and enjoy. Yeah, so
he had to have a fault.
What?
He had to have one fault about him.
He was extremely prudish. He did not believe in. He's kind of like your dad. Like your dad, if you're gonna be like, "Yo, Dad, I'm gonna go get drunk," he thought of Russia, everyone in Russia, as his literal children. It's like he'd be like, "No, no, no, you have to go study." So that's, yeah, if that makes sense.
Yes, so we'll do that 10 o'clock on Friday, and when we'll be back here Wednesday to finish. Well, no, we're not finishing up. We're doing the next 3 minutes of,
or the next however long. We've radically accepted that it's going to take us a long time to debunk everything. So however long it takes us to debunk Chapo's cringe, that's how long we'll take.
All right, so I think that's it.
Okay, so please subscribe, hit the like button, do all those things. Go to historically.substack.com/subscribe and become a paid subscriber. And yeah, so with that, we'll be back a lot this week, and then we'll see what more we can do depending on whether we can get monetized or not monetized. And please share this with all your friends, families, enemies, and everyone else you can think of. Put it in Reddit forums and everything else. Just, yeah, if each one of you just like randomly decides to put it in a Reddit forum, maybe we'll spread the message. We'll have to figure this out together.
Also, we're close to the monetization on YouTube. So if you can watch a couple of videos this week, that helps.
Yep, just watch 2-minute videos and we'll be there. With that, I have to say. Okay. Thank you so much, Connie. She said, "I'm preaching to the choir, but it's great for sharing with propagandized leftists." Absolutely. I can do, I'm very good at debunking propaganda. I go line by line by line, and that's why it takes so much long.